Hi, everybody. It's really nice to have you here with us this evening for our first Campfire Conversation. So our goal with Campfire Conversations is to host a series of presentations and conversations throughout the year to share important updates to our programs and to our site with you. And so welcome to our first one. I'm sure you all already know a little bit about who we are, and Kylie certainly covered it, but just in case, we'll talk a little bit about Columbia Springs. Our mission is to offer a unique setting and educational experiences that foster a greater awareness of the natural world and inspire stewardship. We are a nearly 100-acre urban natural area located in eastern Vancouver in the Columbia Slope watershed along Old Evergreen Highway. Our site is host to the historic Vancouver Trout Hatchery, over 2 miles of lush forested trails, lakes and natural springs, and a diversity of wildlife. We provide nationally acclaimed environmental education programming to every 5th grade student in the Vancouver and Evergreen Public Schools districts. And we host Prepare Clark County, a program that fixes your broken items for free. And we provide salmon in the classroom experiences to over 50 classrooms each year. So our first Campfire Conversation is to share some big news about our site with you. We are going to be replacing the West Biddle Lake Dam next summer in 2022. As part of this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the rich history of the land, the status of the current dam, and then we're going to open it up for questions. But feel free to ask questions as you have them in the chat. Columbia Springs occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples. In particular, lands taken from the Chehalis, Cowlitz, Clatsop, Chinook, Klickitat, and other tribes in an executive order signed July 8, 1864. We recognize Washington's federally recognized Native nations and historic Indigenous communities, Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. The area that includes Columbia Springs, or what is now Columbia Springs, has a long history of cultural and ecological disturbance. Prior to European settlers, Indigenous peoples once called this area home and had a strong sense of connection and reciprocity with the land. Once European settlers entered the landscape, it was forever changed. The landscape has a strong history, kind of post-pioneer, of lumbering and hatchery. Next slide, Kylie. Thank you. In 1827, the British Hudson's Mill Bay Company constructed a water-powered mill nearby in what is now Columbia Springs. The lumber that was made at this mill was used to build Fort Vancouver and was also exported all over the world. The decision to build a mill at the designated location was driven by ample water supply fueled by natural springs. You can see in the map in this photo that where we are is where it says mill, sort of after Fort Vancouver to the east along the Columbia River. In 1920, Evergreen Highway was paved in concrete, dams were built on the west and east ends of the lake to create water storage, and the Biddle Hatchery was established by Spencer Biddle. Biddle raised rainbow trout, which were sold to Union Pacific Railroad and also to local restaurants. And at this time, there was only one Biddle Lake, which you can see in this slide. So this is a drawing that was done as part of like a site evaluation in 1931, and you can see there's only one lake there. The lakes were later split into 2 parts as a result of maintaining water rights below each of the dams. On September 20th of 1937, the Washington Department of Game bought the property from Miss Carolyn Unander, think I said that right, for the purposes of building a hatchery. This was part of a Works Progress Administration project, and the hatchery was completed in 1938. We raise a lot of fish at Columbia Springs, so aside from rearing hundreds of thousands of rainbow trout and steelhead, we also participate in a recovery program for the Lower Columbia River's chum program. This year, we've raised approximately 250,000 chum fry. So let's talk about the dam. West Biddle Dam, which is our project, was built about 100 years ago, and it was for the purpose of storing water for fish rearing at the Biddle Hatchery. And there are some key things to consider in the original installation and construction of this dam. It's likely that the dam was not intended to be the permanent structure that it is today. And while I can't speak to Spencer Biddle's plans for his hatchery, I can't imagine that he believed we would still be operating a hatchery on site this many years later. When the dam and East Biddle Dam were installed circa 1920, the design did not include rebar, and the walls of the dams are about 6 inches thick on average. So as part of our due diligence, our engineers at WSP conducted a very detailed geotechnical survey. Unsurprisingly, we confirmed that Columbia Springs has a lot of groundwater, but the report also found that the soils surrounding the dam, both under and on either side, are heavily saturated. So if you look at this slide, there's an assumed lake bottom elevation sort of in the center. It's a light purpley blue color in the figure. And that's where the dam is currently sitting. So you can see in the figure that there's dark brown coloring, and those areas indicate areas of high resistivity. So they're really dry. They didn't respond to the geotechnical survey showing that they were wet, so it likely manifests as compacted hard soil or bedrock. The areas that are more pink or purple in color indicate the lowest levels of resistivity, and that show that soils are more saturated. It isn't very surprising given that the dam's bottom is resting about 8 feet above the assumed bedrock layer. So one of the questions asked at the beginning of this project was, why not just tear it down? There's a lot of good reasons to remove dams typically. There's a growing movement to remove them where the costs, including the environmental, safety, and sociocultural impacts, outweigh the benefits like hydropower, flood control, irrigation, or recreation, or when the dam no longer serves any other useful purpose. In this case, West Biddle Dam is an example where the benefits of the dam, including the $8 million per year industry that returns money into Washington's economy, outweigh the options for removal. There's some things to know about our particular part of the Columbia Slope watershed. The spring water that flows from Columbia Springs and down into the Columbia River doesn't support natural fish-bearing activities. And what that means is that naturally, there are no fish using the system. And this has likely been true since the last ice age ended, just because of the distance between where the water leaves the Columbia Slope and enters the Columbia River. It's about a 10 to 15 foot drop at any given time during the year. The water that flows from our springs, though, has the right pH balance and year-round temperature to provide the perfect conditions for rearing hatchery fish. So our dam is used for water storage and supplies the hatchery. So what have we done so far? Last summer, the summer of 2020, we procured our engineering firm, which is WSP. You might recognize WSP from the redesign of Vancouver's waterfront. And a site analysis of the dam and surrounding areas was conducted, including the geotechnical report that I mentioned earlier. In the fall, winter of last year, early into this year, engineers worked with partner organizations like DFW to analyze the data retrieved from the studies and then create detailed reports for us to use as part of determining how we wanted to move forward and what our options were for this dam. Concept designs were completed and discussed, and 30% design plans were completed based on those conversations. In the winter and spring of 2021, we completed 60% design plans, and 90% design stages are underway. Permitting process has also begun, including a cultural resource assessment. So what's going to happen next? What are we doing? Over this summer, we are working towards final design and a construction review with local contractors. Our permitting will continue, and we will be procuring major components of the dam, like the gates for the water and release, and then a bridge that will go on site. In the fall, we'll be starting an RFP process for selecting our contractor for construction, and we will make a selection. And then in the winter time, we'll do some pre-construction activities like putting up safety, fencing, and getting the site ready for construction. And then next summer, beginning late May, we'll be doing the actual construction of the project. And through fall and into the winter, we'll be doing rehabilitation of the site once everything is done. So how will this affect you? So prior to construction, as I mentioned, we'll be putting some safety fences placed on site. So at that time, we're going to reroute some of our trail access for the Heron Loop. During construction, the trail will be an out and back style trail rather than the loop that it is now. So you'll go through the north side of that trail and come back instead of being able to go all the way around. The lake will be drained just like we do every summer, so not much surprise there. And then during construction, there'll be periods of time where there'll be large equipment on site, dump trucks, excavators, you name it. And so at this time, you can expect minor delays in traffic on certain days when we're moving materials to and from the site, but otherwise the roads will be open and uninhibited. The construction area itself will be off limits to all members of the public, and our goal is to be able to run our summer camps and continue our field trip programs during the construction period with some minor adjustments. That is kind of the basic overview. So if you have any questions about this project or you want to follow along and see how we're doing, we're going to be posting regular updates to our site. And then we also have a sign up link that you can click on, and it will let you sign up for specialized emails to get those notifications when they happen. Now we're going to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Okay, let's see here. Look at our questions, and I'll pull up a map here so we can look at them while we're doing this as well. But our first one, I think, Catherine, is how big is this dam?
That's a great question. So the dam is going to end up being about 60 feet long, and it currently isn't particularly tall, but it's going to end up being about 8 feet taller, 8 to 10 feet taller, depending on where that final bedrock layer rests. And so it will probably be 20 to 25 feet, depending on that final, amount of where the bedrock is.
Okay. Very cool. Everybody get your questions in. And I'll look at a couple others we've gotten here. We have one. So do we have a better timeline on when exactly construction is going to start on this, or is it just going to be summer sometime?
So we're aiming to drain the lake in early May, and then by mid to late May, we'll begin construction. We have a narrow in-water working period, and so we'll be working within that. Construction in the water area itself, so anywhere where water flows, will be done by the end of August.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Makes sense. What is the environmental impact of this project? Have we done any sort of study on what's going to happen with that?
Great question. So there are obviously a lot of different things that are going to impact the environment of Columbia Springs in this project. And so as part of our analysis, our site analysis, our engineer is actually helping us determine what that impact is going to look like overall. And so we'll be able to release the information that comes from that study as it becomes available.
Great. So how will this new dam be different than the old dam? Are we including any improvements?
That is also a great question. So the dam right now, as I said, is only about 6 inches thick on average, and it doesn't touch bedrock. So in the event of an earthquake, it wouldn't fare so well. So our goal is to make it so that it's more seismically stable. And so the dam, instead of being the same width from top to bottom, will actually have a tapered sort of structure. It will be reinforced with rebar, and then we're going to key it into the bedrock below so that it can't slip during a seismic event.
Seems safer. How much is this going to cost, and who's going to pay for it?
Excellent questions. So we are fortunate enough to have received state funding for both the engineering portion of this project and then also the construction portion of this project. So this comes out of the state capital budget, an improvement to Southwest Washington. And it's estimated, gosh, it's so hard to estimate what things will cost once next summer rolls around, given the way that prices have been increasing. But it's estimated to cost somewhere between $1.1 and $1.8 million. It's a good, large project.
Yeah, we're very grateful to have that funding, for sure. Do we know what the impact might be on our watershed in general from having a dam in this area?
So I think if you look at this map down below, you know, the impact that's happened with our watershed, at least in terms of having the dam there, is probably not as great as the impact as the surrounding neighborhoods that have been built over time. Not so much the older neighborhood that's down below Evergreen Highway and around it, but the kind of new housing divisions that were up kind of in that northeast corner of the photo. And I say that because, you know, these springs are and were throughout the hillside. And so many of them had to be capped during construction of both those neighborhoods and then the highways as is progress. And so I don't think that our little dam really makes that much of a difference in terms of the water itself and how it flows into the Columbia. Additionally, the water maintains the same flow year-round, except for when we drain the lake. There's a higher level of flow during that period, and that helps us flush out sediment. But otherwise, the water flow that's happening through the dam right now, or the opening in the dam right now, without having any kind of dam there, is the same as the flow as when the dam boards are fully up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a related question to that, why is the lake drained right now? Where did our lake go?
Where did our lake go? I've been asked this question a lot lately. Gosh, cold lake sounds really nice right now. So the lake is drained each year, or almost every year, as part of a kind of a two-step process. One is to help Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife with invasive species management, and that includes both invasive plants, but also an invasive parasite that impacts fish rearing. So at one point, fish were reared in the lake, and so there's concern that if we don't follow a certain protocol, that parasites could then enter the water or thrive in the water and then enter into our raceways downstream. So we do draw water from the lake to fuel those raceways. And then we also do it because the dam itself currently is not in very good shape. And so it relieves stress from that pressure that's on the dam.
Yeah, I know the ducks and the deer have been loving the lack of lake.
Deer love it.
Yes, definitely. So Catherine, do we have any idea of what this new dam is going to look like? Is it going to be pretty much the same as the other one if you see it at face value?
If you look at it on its face, no pun intended, it will look roughly the same from the outside. So a lot of the improvements that we're making are going to end up being underground. And so other than the fact that the dam will have that sort of tapered structure to it, and of course it will be newer concrete, and there will be some new gate features. Right now the gate is actually a very old original system. It's boards that are stacked on top of each other in order to control the level of the lake. And we will be replacing that with a manually operated leaf gate or knife gate, which will open both up and down in any way that the hatchery folks need for it to operate. And so, that's probably the most visible change that you'll see.
Seems like a lot of money for just essentially a concrete wall. Is there anything else that is going to be happening in conjunction with this project?
That's a great question. So the other thing that we have in the works, although we are not quite ready to share our concepts, is that below the dam right now is a concrete spillway. And so the spillway carries water from the lake down into a settling pond that is below the hatchery. And so our goal is to take this opportunity and turn it into a way to have an outdoor classroom. And so the spillway is going to get shortened. And in that time, or in that shortening, we're going to be adding in a more robust pedestrian bridge. And then below that bridge out to the settling pond, which is quite lovely, we're going to create an engineered stream course. So it will be engineered settling, if you will. It will still allow sediment to flow and settle like it needs to in order to meet the hatchery's requirements. But it will have a really natural feel to it, and we'll be able to show students what a healthy stream course and the components of a healthy stream course for salmonids like trout and salmon, what it looks like. So they can use that as part of the lessons that we have built into our programming.
Very exciting. I know I'm excited to see it. I wonder if everybody else is as well. But it looks like that's all the questions we have in the queue for now. So I'll let everybody else have a minute here to talk about it. And just so we can pull it up on the map, really the location we're talking about is right here, correct, Catherine? Yeah, so you can see this is like where our administrative building is and Evergreen Highway, and Hatchery is down this way. So you guys will see a lot of stuff happening here over the next year. It'll be really exciting.
It's going to be a lot of incredible work, and it will be messier before it looks amazing. So bear with us.
Yes. Please bear with the noise as well.
Shouldn't be too bad. There are only a few days where we'll actually be doing really loud construction with removing the dam. And then after that, most of the work is much quieter.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it quiet, but it's not as loud as tearing apart concrete.
Great to know. Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So I think we'll let everybody get back to the rest of their evening, unless Catherine, you have any last words?
I don't. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. And we'll be doing more of these as the months go on. And our goal is to update you all as often as we can about the West Biddle Lake Dam project. So please feel free to send your questions anytime.